Onto the president's call this morning with President Xi. Does the White House now have a sense of whether or not China has decided whether to assist Russia backfill its supplies and sort of fulfill its request for material in support of its invasion of Ukraine?
Well, I'm not going to give an assessment of that from here. What I can tell you is that the majority of this call, as I think you heard, you saw in the readout, and you heard, I think, on the call we just did, but was focused on Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. The president spent the vast majority of the nearly 2 hours was spent with the president outlining the views of the United States and our allies and partners on this crisis, including a detailed overview of efforts to prevent and then respond to the invasion, how we got here, steps we've taken, where we've gone, and why. Of course, as was also noted in the readout, but let me just reiterate, he also conveyed and described the implications and consequences if China provides material support to Russia. But again, I'm not going to provide any additional assessment from here.
During the readout of this call, a senior official said that the president was really sort of laying out his assessment of the situation to President Xi, that he was making clear the implications of certain actions, but that President Biden wasn't making specific requests of China. Why not, and given the stakes here?
Because China has to make a decision for themselves about where they want to stand and how they want the history books to look at them and view their actions. That is a decision for President Xi and the Chinese to make.
Given the growing concerns about China possibly aligning with Russia, would you say it's more concerning at this point that they would help Russia resupply, help Russia with military equipment, or that they would offer economic support to help Russia evade sanctions?
Any of those would be concerning to us, but I'm not going to give a rank order assessment of which we're more concerned about.
And you don't have a sense that China may be leaning more in one direction or another?
Not an assessment I can provide from here.
I guess sort of a logistical question. You know,
Sure.
the Chinese got out a readout of the call fairly quickly.
Before it was even done.
It was, I think, 3.5, maybe 4
Remarkable.
hours before your readout was out. Should we read anything into the time that it took to get your side of the story out?
So it was a lengthy call, as you all know. 2-hour call is of course a lengthy call, even with translation. And what typically happens, and this time is a little longer than typical, but is there's a meeting to discuss what happened during the meeting and assess what kind of information we can provide publicly. Obviously, we want to do as much as that as possible to all of you, but we also want to ensure we're protecting the diplomatic channels and conversations. So it was an effort to do exactly that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, so, we've spoken to U.S. and European diplomats who say that there's still not exactly an agreement on what the red line would be. That, when China would face consequences. Can you say a little bit more about those discussions and whether there is agreement with G7 allies and others who have joined in about what the trigger is and what sort of consequences there would be?
Well, Andrea, I would say, the movement of China to align with Russia, or to the movement of them to align with Russia, or their proximity of moving closer together, is certainly of great concern to us, as we have expressed, and we are not the only country that has expressed that concern, including many other members of the G7 have expressed exactly that concern. So this is part of the discussion. It has been an ongoing part of the discussion. Expect it certainly would be when the president goes to Europe next week, but we're not in a place at this point to outline the specifics. We're still discussing.
And then just to follow up on that, initially, I think going into the call, we were expecting that there would be discussion about Iran and North Korea as well. Did the two leaders get around to those issues, and are they any closer in terms of alignment on those issues? And then just to your first point, or your response, one of the issues that has separated the U.S. and China in recent years has been disputes over trade and lots of tariffs. Would you anticipate that China would face a larger trade war if, or additional sanctions and tariffs if it does proceed to align more closely?
Well, we have a range of tools that could be considered, and sanctions are certainly one tool in the toolbox, as they are for other countries as well, even if as we have not outlined specific consequences, and we'll communicate those directly to China and, of course, with our European partners and counterparts. The call was focused, as the readout conveyed. The vast majority of it was on Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, but also the issue of Taiwan was raised by the Chinese, and the president reiterated that U.S. policy on Taiwan has not changed. That was really the vast majority of the focus of the call. Obviously, there are a range of issues and topics we discussed with the Chinese, and as a part of this call, there was an agreement on ensuring there was an open line of communication and that the discussion would continue in this critical period ahead, of course, at lower levels. Go ahead.
During the Stowe call, did President Xi ever refer to it as an invasion?
We'll let President Xi and his team outline any more specifics about his component of the conversation.
Why not reveal if he called it an invasion or called it a war?
Because we don't, as a policy, speak for other countries. They can speak for themselves.
Yesterday, Secretary Blinken said the administration was concerned that China is considering answering Russia's request for more military equipment. After the Stowe call, does the White House still have that concern?
We have that concern. The president detailed what the implications and consequences would be if China provides material support to Russia as it conducts brutal attacks against Ukrainian cities and civilians. And obviously that is something we will be watching and the world will be watching.
So that concern hasn't gone away following the call?
Obviously actions are a key part of what we'll be watching.
Did President Biden directly ask President Xi if he intends to help Russia?
Well, he made clear what the implications and the consequences would be if China provides material support to Russia as it conducts brutal attacks against Ukrainian cities and civilians. And that made clear what the consequences would be should they do that.
But did he ask, do you intend to help Russia, yes or no?
I think making clear what the consequences are made clear we don't want them to do it.
So can you offer any explanation for why the U.S. still has concerns after this call?
Because we'll continue to watch until we see what actions they take or don't take.
And following up on Andrea's question, does the administration view any distinction between financial support and military support for Russia? Or will the consequences, will there be consequences regardless of what kind of aid?
We would watch closely, and we would be prepared for there to be consequences, but we would look closely on what it is, and we would align with our partners around the world.
And is there going to be escalatory consequences like we've seen with Russia?
Again, I'm not going to get into a hypothetical at this point in time. We'll have those discussions directly with the Chinese and directly with our European partners.
And one more. Short of getting any guarantees from China that they are not going to help Russia, and short of China condemning Russia for its actions, what is it about the call that President Biden thinks went well, as he said to one of my colleagues?
I think it was an opportunity for the president to convey directly what our detailed efforts have been, what we have seen on the ground, how we have responded to the invasion, why we have the significant level of concern that we have, and also to convey very directly, leader to leader, what the implications and consequences would be if Russia provides material support. And that leader to leader engagement, an opportunity for there to be a continuing discussion, certainly the president sees as a positive development.
Jen, I want to follow up with you on the call. You have, from the podium and in the readout, it says the president described the implications and consequences if China provides material support to Russia. So to be clear, did President Biden warn President Xi not to send any support to Russia?
I think he made clear what the implications and consequences would be if he did. That is laying out what the consequences would be. President Xi has to decide what he's going to do here.
And not just but is it fair to characterize that as a warning?
I would characterize it exactly as I said it.
And did President Biden and President Xi discuss the possibility of lifting sanctions and or tariffs as a way to get China?
This was not about carrots. This was about laying out what the implications and consequences would be.
Did the president step away from the phone call and have a sense that he can work with China as it relates to Ukraine?
Well, I think he came away feeling that he had conveyed clearly what the implications and consequences would be, and also that he had the opportunity to lay out specifically what steps we've taken, why, and what we're seeing on the ground. And he also said that we would continue conversations task the teams to continue conversations. So that indicates that we will continue to engage with them.
Jen, you mentioned Taiwan. Will the U.S. deliver javelins and stingers on time this year to Taiwan? Can you answer that?
I don't have any update for you on military assistance to Taiwan. I would point you to the Department of Defense.
Jen, when the president spoke to President Xi, did he set out any particular benchmarks by which he would measure their compliance, either financially on the arms issue any time frames out there? What, in other words, did he come to some kind of understanding or declaration to President Xi about how he would be measuring success?
Success in terms of whether or not he provides material support? I don't have anything more to outline on that for you. I would just say that the call was not about making asks. It wasn't about making assessments. It was about having an ongoing discussion and dialogue about the illegal invasion, or the invasion of Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine.
And was there any discussion of the agreement that President Xi reached with President Putin just at the opening of the Olympics?
I just don't have more details on the call to read out beyond what we've conveyed to date. Go ahead.
Yeah, what can you say about the severity of the implications and consequences for Russia, for China, if they do indeed, in the estimation of the U.S., provide material support to Russia? I mean, are these to the level where it should really make China think twice before assisting Russia?
Well, it's up to President Xi and the Chinese to make that decision. But the president, again, laid out very clearly and directly in the call what the implications and consequences would be if they provided material support.
Why is the White House choosing not to elaborate and disclose more about what the consequences could be here?
Because we feel that it would be most constructive to have those conversations directly with the Chinese. Go ahead.
Hi. A senior administration official just told us that that President Biden didn't make any specific requests to Xi and that China will make its own decisions. But
I think I just said that too. There you go.
But we're nearing a pretty critical point in the war where, according to your own assessment, Russia seems poised to potentially deploy bio or chemical weapons. How much time is there for China to really weigh in here with Putin, and why not press for that while on the call?
I think that the primary focus of this call was for the president to lay out specifically the consequences and specifically where we've come to date. His assessment was that was the most constructive way to spend the call, and that it's going to be up to President Xi and the Chinese to determine what role they're going to play moving forward. Go ahead.
Implications and consequences.
Yeah.
I'm asking about this again because in the lead up to Russia's invasion, the White House was really extremely transparent, laying out call after call and briefing after briefing a lot of the specifics that we then saw implemented. Why, in this case, is it just saying implications and consequences and not giving the same specifics?
Sure, because we feel it's the most constructive way to engage and have a constructive dialogue.
But just to clarify, the specifics were given out in detail on this call. It sounds like what you're saying.
Correct. I'm not going to give you more details about the level of detail, but it was a detailed engagement. I'm not going to outline that more from here, but he was specific about what he described on the call. Go ahead.
I hope I'm not beating a dead horse here.
It's okay.
Yeah, okay, it's Friday. So you said previously the point of this call would be to see where she stands.
Yep.
You're obviously reluctant to tell us where she stands based on that call, and you pointed to the Chinese, but their readout, if you've read it, is doesn't tell you much either. So can you at least say after a 2-hour call, is the White House confident it knows where she stands, and you just don't want to tell us, or are you not telling us because you don't really understand where he stands?
I think what I can tell you is that they tasked the teams with having continued discussions, but I'm not going to provide you any additional assessment from here. Go ahead in the middle.
How does President Biden define the current Chinese and U.S. relationship right now? Have you scheduled more communications, meetings, calls?
Yeah, they tasked the teams to follow up on today's conversation in this critical period ahead. I don't have anything in terms of when that will take place, but that was part of it. Go.
On the call, there have been in recent days concern voiced by U.S. officials about China amplifying Russian disinformation about the situation there. Did that come up on the call? What was said?
I just don't have more details. We've obviously been very vocal about our concern on that front, but I don't have more details about whether that was part of the discussion.
You mentioned that on the call, the president focused on Ukraine. The Chinese side raised the issue of Taiwan. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you're not giving us any specifics on sanctions, export controls and such, but was there a discussion about broader trade relations between the U.S. and China? And then I'll have a follow-up question specific about American investments in Chinese tech firms after that.
Well, the vast majority of the call was about those two topics. So beyond that, I don't have more to read out for you, but that was really the focus of the call.
Okay, and so a couple of administration officials have been advocating that the president issues an executive order that would ban American investments in Chinese tech firms. What is the status of that? What is causing the delay? Does it have anything to do with the TikTok Oracle deal? Is there an anticipated timeline?
I don't have any update or preview of what that looks like at this point.
Thank you, Jen. I wanted to ask about the rapport between Xi and President Biden. The two men have shared a meal together. They've known each other for more than 10 years.
Yeah.
This is an important moment in U.S.-Chinese relations. How did their personal rapport play into today's call?
Well, I would say they know each other. As you've noted, they've spent time together. They've had a range of direct and candid conversations. This is not the first, and that certainly contributes to the president's ability to be as direct as he is, whether it is laying out where we've come from and why we are at this point, and his great concerns and significant concerns about Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, and also what the implications and consequences would be. So there's no question that the president's time on the world stage, his prior relationship with President Xi, having spent time with him, engaged with him directly, had many multi-hour calls and meetings with him, contributes to his ability to have those type of conversations.
Did the president bring up those past meetings in this 2-hour call today?
I don't think there's a reason to bring them up. They both know that they've had past meetings. I think it just starts the meeting from an understanding of where the other is coming from. Go ahead.
Yeah, in the first event with the president today, why didn't the president choose to address the phone call personally between he and President Xi?
Because it was about a different topic. And there's a lot of things the American people care deeply about. So it was his effort to communicate about a range of issues.
Well, when you have the leader of the largest economy in the world and the second largest economy in the world, and they're talking, they could fall on either side of an invasion. The American people might want to hear directly from the president.
Well, we've provided a range of updates, briefings, readouts, and hopefully you all will be effective, as I'm sure you will, in communicating that to the American people.
One more thing, on the call, did the president push China about business, the Chinese companies doing business in Russia?
Well, I would say first that, the president, as we all have made clear, that there have been implications. As you see, while we have not asked companies to take specific steps, you look at Russia and what's happened there and what the implications have been for the Russian economy of companies pulling out. And, that's certainly something for every country to watch as they're making decisions about which side of this conflict they're going to stand on.
Did President Biden talk to President Xi Jinping about the escalate tensions on Korean Peninsula? How did President Xi respond on this?
Again, the vast majority of the call was about Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. And again, when President Xi raised Taiwan, the president reiterated the U.S. policy on Taiwan. Obviously, there are a lot of important issues that we discuss with the Chinese, some where we work together, some where we have strong concern, and there's a lot of channels for that. But that was the primary focus of the conversation.